Thanks, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Wurundjeri land, pay my respects to elders past and present, and thank you to Auntie Julianne, and I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal people in the room. And I also, I think it's being here reminded me that last time I think I was in this area, I was listening to Lydia talking at the commemoration of Tanamina and Morboy Hina, and to acknowledge that there's a fantastic monument to freedom fighters just up the road, and we're very near to their resting place. So to acknowledge the freedom fighters in Victoria. I don't really know what my role is because I'm sure that you have a lot of questions. So I'll just start by asking a general one. Thank you so much. It was an amazing panel. I'm sure everybody agrees. And I think it really made visible the systems and the broader system. For me, I guess to think about them all together as one panel, because there's lots of similarities and connections, but also lots of differences. I'm interested in, for each of you, what does it mean to, I have a sense that the system, as you said, Carla, the system's doing perfectly what it's meant to do, which is to be violent. So what does it mean for us to be working with and sort of in that system? For a lot of us, we're funded by the state government or maybe the Commonwealth. How do we negotiate this relationship of trying to dismantle something that we're kind of fed by as well? I don't know if anybody immediately wants to say something.
I was going to mention at one point, or in my introduction, that Australia Asia Worker Links made a decision many, many years ago not to accept funding. So we're an organisation that is unfunded, we're all volunteers, and for 40 years, or for the majority of those 40 years, we've built international solidarity as activists. And that doesn't mean that other organisations should take that decision. It just means that when we were building links across borders, and when you're fighting against huge companies like ExxonMobil or ICTSI, which is a container company that owns one of the docks here in Melbourne. When you're fighting against big companies have resources to track and intimidate and harass and so on. So we weren't going to end up in a position where politically we were compromised. So we decided to be hungry and beg, borrow and steal to do the work that we do. But I think it is interesting, and I worked in the community sector for 15 years, and now I'm a public servant, and in every experience of my work life I've been a member of my union. I find it interesting in the community sector that this issue of funding often comes up. And one of the things that when you start to analyse the mechanics of a global economic system like capitalism, and you recognise that it divides workers based on things that aren't real in terms of the differences it causes between people, things like race and gender and sexuality and so on. When we're divided on those bases, apparently because those bases are a reason we can perform more highly or otherwise. So that's what I mean by the non-truth about those divisions. In the community sector, we never made the leap to say, but two, we're also divided for this fight for money. See, there is a shit ton of money in the world. The government has a shit ton of money, and yet we accept that what we're fighting for and squabbling over is this falsified fixed pool of funding for work. So again, to go back to some of the things Carla spoke about earlier, the Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So this fake pool of money which doesn't... So we're accepting that. But actually, if we regard the fight against the system as something that is absolutely necessary, it's not just that your employment gives you the opportunity to fight that system. So either we take it seriously that actually all of our lives are at stake, not just whether we can create a community organisation that is dedicated to dealing with something. I'm not saying we all quit our jobs tomorrow or whatever, but the other part of that is having a job, being employed in this current economic system is necessary. Everybody needs to go to work. So how you relate to that particular job is also something that I think needs to be a part of this conversation. When your job is tied to funding, this is what you were saying, that the state is not going to fund necessarily the destruction of itself. And we've already said that state is part of the violence that keeps all of this in place. I'm not saying that therefore you make a choice not to work here or, no, there's no ethical job under this system. You either work in the community sector, which is fraught, or the government sector, which is fraught, or the private sector, which is fraught. Any version of employment in this system is deriving profit for free from the labour of others. So the question becomes, how do you fight that? Not how do we fight each other for these measly pieces of funding. It is how do we fight that system, and how do we deal with the contradictions within our own ranks so that we can work together in order for that to be the bigger target.
Thank you.
That's why I work for myself now. I think, the art of war is it's a great strategy of how to divide people and how to conquer. And the strategy almost succeeded in this country. But I think, what I see out there in communities is there's no healing for our women, and there's no opportunity for our women to come together as women, because we are faced with the struggle of survival every day. So, if our women didn't have that struggle to survive each day, then we could probably find the time to connect with one another and heal. But the number of women I've spoken to who've been dealing with this for forever, I've asked them, when do you heal? When do you have time to heal? And the answer is always never. Never. Because it happens again the following week and the following week. And, you look at social media and all these white fellas are going on holiday and putting their pics up of the luxury of having a holiday. And it saddens me to think that our people, particularly our women in these communities, don't get that opportunity. So the only way I think that is going to have any kind of effect is for our women to heal and have the time to heal. That means that it's not just a family violence issue, it's a protection of land issue, it's the campaign to stop this drunkenness in public place issue. If we had allies supporting us on every issue that we have to deal with every single day, then maybe that will allow us to some time to heal together.
Did either of you wanted to? Thank you.
I think just reiterating what both of you said, and that conversation around the way that the system individualises responsibility. I'm always kind of conflicted, even in the work that I do, around why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, who I'm doing it with and for. And these are questions that I have to ask myself every day. And the other side of that too is my job is not a 9 to 5. These issues that we speak about, that we work, to overcome for Aboriginal women, we don't go home at 5 o'clock and think about something else. That's not how that works. We're answering calls from family. We are dealing with our own trauma or not dealing with our own trauma. Everything is 24/7 for us when we're talking about this stuff. This isn't just what we get paid to do in the daytime. The fundamental reasons why we choose to do this work in the first instance is because it is about our lives. It's about life and death for Aboriginal women, Aboriginal men and Aboriginal children. So it's, there is that conflict and that struggle around that participation in capitalism, in the thing that is trying to kill you, literally. And it is about survival. And at some level, you have to accept a compromise in your own survival. That part of that is going to require you to participate in the very thing that is trying to kill you, just to survive. And so it's that conflict that is ongoing that you wake up with every single day, and it sounds, quite gloomy, but that's the reality. And there's no point in trying to sugarcoat what that is. And every day we grow, it becomes more obvious because the effects of capitalism are more visible for all of us. What it's done to our land, the thing that we've been crying about since white people got here, the damage that has been done to our land, that now affects everybody in this country. And all of a sudden, there's cries about climate change, when we've been screaming about this for over 200 years. What's been happening to our women, to our children? That's been happening for hundreds of years. So all of that, there is always this compromise, but there's also always this knowing in why we are engaging in that and why we have to continue to do that.
Thank you. I don't know, we've got a little bit of time. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask? Because I don't want to take up all the time, so you don't have an opportunity. If you can put up your hand. No, I guess I've got other questions if you don't have any, but I just don't want people to miss out. I suppose I feel like you've all given really practical examples of how we can take action, and a lot of that is around paying the rent and seeing the bigger picture. I think we've kind of named the big system as capitalism. Are there examples of allyship that you haven't covered that you want to talk about? I'm wondering what a coalition politics looks like for all of these sort of how do we all come together? And I guess there's unions and there's there are different sort of advocacy platforms that we can talk about, but how should we all be coming together? Is that too broad?
I think a coalition politics is the way to go. I don't know how we get it together, but I think it's just from this panel, I think it's awesome to see kind of representations of different movements here. So, there's been, migrant activism for the last 40 years. There has been feminist activism for a long time. Aboriginal activism since the beginning, obviously. I think if we were all able to come together, it wouldn't be easy because we've all got different issues, but obviously some issues in common. We'd need to work out all the, nobody comes to the table pure. We can't say that we come to the table without racism or without homophobia. We all come with our isms as cool and right on as we want to be. We all have to acknowledge our own issues, I suppose, and you need to address those before you come to the table with, sit down with somebody and, talk coalition politics. So I think it would be amazing if we could do it. I think it's damn hard work, but yeah, it would be great to hear from co-panellists on what they think about that too.
I think the priority is to stop the injustice against the First People of this country, and particularly in Victoria, being one of the only states in the country that haven't reparated stolen generations. They're waiting for everyone to die. This government have got a lot of money and they can afford to reparate the handful of stolen generation survivors. We know who those people are, and some of them are on their deathbed right now. And those great grandmothers have got great grandchildren that are affected by their removals. So we need a movement, not just us on our own as a small percentage of the population, but we need people to support our calls for justice, and reparating stolen generation is one part of that. The other part is this movement to stop this drunkenness in a public place, where we just lost an Aboriginal grandmother as a result, someone very close to us. And we know the impacts of that whole family, the ripple effect that that's had on that whole family with a death in custody like that. So we need movements to stop those kinds of injustices, support our movements to, we are the First People, and this country owes us a lot.
I agree with Lydia that the most critical issue in Australia is the issue of justice for Aboriginal people, both the issue of land justice and the social justice consequences of land theft, the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in custody, the ongoing theft of children from families through the child protection system. I wanted to pick up on this language of allyship though, because I have a very different position on it, and I know that ally has become so entrenched in the lexicon now that it is almost impossible to challenge, and that when there is a challenge to it, it is often met with very, very strong responses. So I wanted to say I respect strong responses and also a culture of discussion. But I think ally as a word is politically incorrect in relation to the fight. Because what ally does is it says your issues, your issues, your issues. Then when we put all those issues in a Venn diagram, that space of overlap is where the issues align. Therefore, that is the place in which the allyship happens. And I think that is more of fighting for the crumbs that were left. Douglas Adams has this quote which, he used it in a sci-fi book about the size of the universe, so I'm going to use that. But it was really powerful for me when I read it, and he's one of my favourite authors, so I read it often. And this is in a very particular context of this machine that literally blows your mind by the size of the universe. And the quote is, if life is going to exist in a universe of this size, the one thing it can't afford to have is a sense of perspective. And I think sometimes that is our reaction to the size of the problem called this system or capitalism, that it is so big. And because we can't hold the size of it, then we go to these very, very small things and we lose perspective. And so I understand that there are people on our side of the struggle that are quite frankly a pack of assholes, you know, that are racist and sexist, that are perpetrators of violence, that are perpetrators of rapes. But they still are on our side. So the question is, how do we relate and what do we say and what do we do? And I'm not saying no individual accountability. But again, to what Carla's been saying, that individual responsibility conceals something. For Sinhalese chauvinism to exist, for the Tamils to be oppressed in Sri Lanka, Sinhalese chauvinism needs to exist. There need to be Sinhalese people that are perpetrating that. But that is Sinhalese chauvinism. For Hindu chauvinism, the same with Hindu chauvinism in India, there needs to be a Muslim minority for that chauvinism to be perpetrated. But it serves a purpose, and the purpose is not for those individual Hindus. They don't benefit from Hindu chauvinism. There is only one thing that benefits from it. So this conversation of allyship, which is you've got these needs and these interests, and it breaks that. There is another word, which is comrade. It recognises that we are all a part of the struggle, even though the system impacts us disproportionately. It absolutely does. There are women on this panel who are considerably disproportionately impacted by the way capitalism comes at them. I do not have to go home worrying that the police might kill me. I just don't. It is not a concern I have. It doesn't mean I'm not concerned with the police or police violence. The police are the police, and our fight against the police is the same. So in that vein, I'm not a big fan of coalition politics either. I'm a fan of, or my struggle is, building a front against capitalism, actually taking the front there. And how you do that is a very big conversation. And my organisation has spent 40 years developing a strategy for that. It's not easy. It takes time.
Thank you. We're at time. We're at time. So I just want to say again, I feel like this panel has been incredible, and we've all got our money's worth already, even if the day doesn't continue. But I'm really looking forward to the workshops at the end of the day, and it's been a real privilege to be able to ask you so many questions. Thank you so much to each of you for your presentations. And can you please join me in showing your appreciation for the panel?